Michelle Williams's life was fraught with difficulties from an early age. At 17, she became pregnant with her first child. Within the next 10 years, Michelle was a mother to 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter from 2 different fathers. She had gone through 2 divorces, and according to her, infidelity was the recurring reason for her failed relationships. Michelle recounted that one of her former partners had an affair with their 17-year-old dental hygienist. However, Paul, one of her younger sons, offered a contrasting viewpoint. He suggested that not only were Michelle's partners unfaithful, but Michelle herself had been unfaithful throughout her marriages. Eric, Michelle's eldest son, described a tumultuous upbringing. Michelle's employment at various exotic nightclubs and topless bars often meant her children were in tow. This environment led her sons to speculate whether she engaged in sex work. The instability of Michelle's career path left a profound imprint on her children. Eric recalled their upbringing as disordered, with the family frequently having to adapt to Michelle's fluctuating life situations. The prevalence of exotic nightclubs and topless bars in their vicinity posed challenges to maintaining a conventional childhood. However, in 2007, Michelle's life seemed to pivot positively when she met Carl Williams. They crossed paths at a swingers club where, according to Carl's brother Joe, Michelle was openly engaging in sexual activities. Despite this, Carl was enamored with her. A successful businessman and computer engineer, Carl had built a thriving company, earning an impressive $500,000 a year. Outside of work, he dedicated time to bodybuilding and martial arts, and he cherished his young daughter deeply. Michelle was drawn to Carl's affluence and success, seeing him as the key to the affluent and stable life she longed for. In 2007, after a brief courtship, Michelle and Carl decided to marry. However, Michelle's sons, Eric and Paul, both Army veterans, were skeptical of the union. They perceived Carl as overbearing and had concerns about his character. Their apprehension was shared by several of Carl's relatives, who also harbored doubts about the marriage. As the wedding approached, the tension between Michelle's and Carl's families grew. Eric and Paul were particularly vocal about their concerns, fearing that Carl's influence could further destabilize their already fragile family dynamics. Despite their objections, Michelle was determined to proceed with the marriage, convinced that Carl's financial stability and successful career would provide the security she and her children needed. The wedding itself was a lavish affair, reflecting Carl's wealth and Michelle's aspirations. However, beneath the surface, there were undercurrents of unease. Some guests noticed a certain coldness between Michelle and Carl, a lack of genuine affection that one would expect in a newlywed couple. In the months that followed, the marriage seemed to be on solid ground. Michelle quit her job at the nightclubs and began to enjoy the comforts of her new life. Carl, on his part, appeared to be a doting husband, often seen showering Michelle with gifts and attention. But the facade of a perfect marriage began to crumble as rumors of infidelity and arguments surfaced. Carl's daughter from a previous relationship revealed that she felt neglected and pushed aside, as her father's attention was now solely focused on Michelle. Meanwhile, Michelle's children struggled to adjust to the new family dynamic, feeling out of place in the luxurious but strict household Carl maintained. As the years passed, the marriage faced numerous challenges. Financial strains, personality clashes, and differing parenting styles led to an increasingly volatile home environment. The couple's public image as a successful and happy family was at odds with the reality of their private life, which was marked by tension and discord. Despite the difficulties, Michelle and Carl remained married, each for their own reasons. Michelle was reluctant to give up the lifestyle she had become accustomed to, while Carl was determined to maintain his image as a successful family man. However, the strain on their relationship was evident, and it was only a matter of time before something had to give. The question remained, would they find a way to overcome their issues, or would their marriage be another casualty of their tumultuous lives? Speculations about Michelle's intentions were rife. Some questioned whether her interest in Carl was purely for his wealth. Carl's sister, Michelle Fletcher, had always found her sister-in-law distant and unkind. She even accused Michelle of overtly flaunting her allure to manipulate men, alleging an incident where Michelle made a suggestive display to her husband, Roger, in the attic. Despite the family's reservations, Carl appeared content in his marriage to Michelle. He had bought a luxurious house in the secure suburbs of Keller, Texas, and lavished Michelle with gifts, including matching Mercedes-Benz cars for their anniversary. The couple had a daughter, and while Carl was a devoted father to both his daughters, Michelle's relationship with her stepdaughter was strained. Accusations flew when Michelle claimed her stepdaughter tried to drug her, leading Carl to send the young girl to rehab. To occupy Michelle, who had no business experience, Carl bought her a frozen yogurt shop named Blueberries in 2011. However, Michelle's commitment to the business was lackluster. She rarely visited unless to withdraw money, treating the shop more like a personal cash dispenser than a business to run. In October 2011, as Carl and Michelle Williams anticipated moving into their new home, complete with a planned pool for their daughter, tragedy struck. On October 13th, at 4:40 a.m., Michelle frantically called 911, claiming an intruder had shot her husband. The police responded swiftly but found no suspects. Upstairs, they encountered a grim scene. Carl, aged 40, had been shot. At the scene of the incident, Michelle recounted to the responding officers that she had been napping on the couch with her daughter when a sudden noise startled her awake. Investigating the source of the disturbance, she headed to the master bedroom, where she believed she spotted a shadowy figure. Before she could comprehend the situation, she felt a sharp blow to her head, causing her to lose consciousness. Upon arrival, crime scene investigators found no signs of forced entry into Carl and Michelle's residence, leaving them puzzled about how the intruder gained access. Furthermore, nothing appeared to have been stolen, with all drawers left untouched and a significant sum of money left undisturbed in a safe. Near the back door, investigators discovered a .45 caliber handgun along with a shell casing and a wrench. Nearby were plastic tubs containing Clorox wipes, suggesting an attempt to sanitize the scene. Despite thorough examination, investigators found no fingerprints or DNA evidence, including from the residents of the house. Michelle's account of the events, though consistent, raised suspicion among detectives, who challenged her narrative when it failed to align with the evidence. After hours of interrogation, Michelle changed her story, alleging that Carl had taken his own life and she had staged the scene to protect their daughter from the truth. Confessing to tampering with evidence, Michelle was charged and released on bail. She maintained her story when speaking to Carl's family, emphasizing his prior struggles with depression. However, her absence from Carl's funeral and her decision to sell off assets he had provided left his family feeling hurt and bewildered. Despite Carl's successful business ventures, Michelle opted to sell their frozen yogurt shop at a fraction of its value, causing further confusion and suspicion among those close to the couple. This series of decisions by Michelle did not sit well with the community or Carl's family. Selling the frozen yogurt shop, named Blueberries, for only $45,000, despite it being purchased by Carl for $110,000 just months before his death, raised many eyebrows. Moreover, Michelle's choice to quickly dispose of Carl's business, which had a strong client base and was generating significant income, added to the growing concerns about her motives. The community of Keller, Texas, was deeply engrossed in the unfolding drama, with the story captivating local and even national attention. The mysterious and tragic circumstances of Carl's death, combined with Michelle's peculiar and seemingly cold-hearted actions post-mortem, painted a picture that many found hard to comprehend. Rumors and speculations circulated as residents tried to piece together the puzzle of the real dynamics within Michelle and Carl's marriage and the truth behind his untimely demise. In the weeks that followed, the investigation into Carl's death continued. Detectives dug deeper into the couple's financial records, personal interactions, and Michelle's activity before and after the incident. They hoped to uncover whether financial incentives might have influenced Michelle's actions. given the hasty liquidation of valuable assets. Carl's family, devastated by their loss and the surrounding scandal, struggled to cope. They grappled with the lack of closure and the tumultuous aftermath, which seemed to contradict the family values Carl had upheld. His daughter, particularly, became a focal point of concern for the family as they worried about her understanding of her father's death and her mother's involvement in the subsequent events. As the legal proceedings progressed, Michelle faced not only the charge of tampering with evidence, but also growing suspicion of more serious criminal involvement in Carl's death. The community awaited the trial, eager for answers and justice in a case that had turned their quiet, gated community into the center of a real-life tragedy. The questions about what really happened that fateful night remained at the forefront of everyone's mind, as they hoped the judicial process would bring forth the truth and allow the community, especially Carl's family, to find peace and closure in a reckless or threatening manner. This plea would significantly reduce the severity of the charges she faced, potentially sparing her from a life sentence. The plea bargain also reflected the complexities and potential vulnerabilities in the prosecution's case, given the initial mishandling of the crime scene by the local police. Michelle was faced with a difficult decision. Accepting the plea deal would mean admitting to lesser crimes and possibly facing a shorter sentence, but it would also involve acknowledging wrongdoing in a public and legal forum, which could further tarnish her reputation and affect her relationship with her daughter and the community. On the other hand, rejecting the plea and facing a full trial carried the risk of being convicted of murder, which would likely lead to a much harsher penalty. After consulting with her legal team, weighing her options, and considering the impact of either decision on her future and that of her family, Michelle decided to accept the plea deal. This decision was driven by the fear of a possible murder conviction and the evidence presented against her, which, despite the procedural errors by the police, appeared compelling enough to risk a conviction in a full trial. In accepting the plea, Michelle was sentenced to a reduced term of incarceration. The court also mandated psychological evaluation and treatment, recognizing the complex personal history and mental health issues that may have influenced her actions. The community and Carl's family received the news of the plea with mixed feelings. While some were relieved that there was at least some form of accountability, others were disappointed and felt that justice had not been fully served. Carl's family, in particular, struggled with the outcome. They felt that the plea deal allowed Michelle to escape the full consequences of her actions and left many questions about Carl's death unanswered. Carl's daughter, now in the care of other family members, was shielded as much as possible from the details of the case, but the effects of her father's tragic death and her mother's legal battles were unavoidable. The family focused on providing her with a stable and supportive environment, hoping to mitigate the impact of the trauma she had experienced. The case of Carl's death lingered in the community's memory as a somber reminder of how deeply personal struggles and hidden aspects of people's lives can spill over, leading to tragic outcomes. It also raised discussions on the effectiveness and sensitivity of local law enforcement in handling such critical and complex situations, prompting calls for better training and procedures to prevent similar issues in the future. To carefully consider the overwhelming evidence pointing to her guilt, the prosecution argued that Michelle's manipulation and deceit extended not only to the alleged murder, but also to her attempts to frame others and mislead the court with fraudulent claims of pregnancy. The defense, on the other hand, tried to paint a picture of Michelle as a misunderstood and troubled individual, pushed to the brink by financial pressures and mental health issues. They suggested that the lack of direct evidence and the potential for mishandled forensic evidence could cast reasonable doubt on her guilt. The defense highlighted discrepancies in the investigation and questioned the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses, particularly focusing on the medical examiner's conclusions and the veracity of Paul's shocking testimony. As the jury deliberated, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. After hours of discussion, they returned with a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The decision was based largely on the compelling testimony of the medical examiner and Michelle's own son, Paul. whose accounts provided a chilling insight into Michelle's calculated approach to covering up her actions. The judge sentenced Michelle to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence reflected not only the severity of her crime, but also her persistent attempts to obstruct justice and manipulate those around her. In the aftermath of the trial, Carl's family felt a mix of relief and profound sadness. Though justice had been served, it did little to fill the void left by Carl's death. His mother and daughter, in particular, faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives, forever marked by tragedy, but hopeful for a future free from the shadow of Michelle's deceit. The community also reacted with a mixture of shock and vindication. Many who had initially supported Michelle felt betrayed and were left questioning how they had been deceived by her facade. The case became a cautionary tale about the depths of manipulation some individuals are capable of, prompting a local discussion on the need for better support systems for families dealing with mental health and financial crises. As for Eric and Paul, the brothers grappled with the reality of their mother's actions and the impact on their own lives. The trial and its outcomes forced them to reconsider their relationship with each other and with the concept of family loyalty. While it was a painful process, it was also a journey towards healing and understanding as they sought to find peace in the midst of the chaos their mother had created. Eric and Paul found themselves on diverging paths following their mother's conviction. Eric, the older of the two, struggled intensely with feelings of betrayal and anger, not only towards his mother, but also his former best friend, Henry, whose involvement with Michelle seemed like a deep personal betrayal. He sought therapy to deal with the emotional fallout, gradually learning to channel his energies into more positive avenues. Paul, on the other hand, was more introspective and withdrawn. The role he had played in the trial, revealing his mother's manipulative plans, weighed heavily on him. He felt a mix of relief at Michelle's conviction and guilt over his pivotal testimony that had helped seal her fate. For him, the road to healing was more about solitude and understanding the complexity of human emotions and relationships. Together, the brothers attempted to salvage their relationship, finding common ground in their shared trauma and the mutual desire to move forward. They began to meet regularly, talking openly about their feelings, their fears, and their hopes for the future. These conversations, though often difficult, helped forge a new bond between them, built on the ruins of their shattered familial trust. Meanwhile, the community's reaction to Michelle's story and trial sparked initiatives aimed at increasing awareness about domestic violence and financial abuse. Seminars and workshops became more frequent, driven by local leaders and advocacy groups who aimed to prevent similar tragedies. Carl's family, particularly his daughter, who had grown close to her grandmother, became active participants in these community efforts, channeling their grief into advocacy and support for others facing similar challenges. The local police department faced its own set of challenges and criticisms. The mishandling of evidence in Carl's case led to a thorough review of their procedures, particularly regarding how they processed and preserved crime scenes. This led to a series of reforms aimed at improving the quality of forensic investigations and ensuring that officers received updated training on handling complex crime scenes. As for the gym Michelle and Henry had started together, it eventually closed down. The community's trust in Henry had eroded significantly once his relationship with Michelle and his role in the broader drama became known. Henry found himself isolated, a pariah in the community that once embraced him. This isolation forced him to relocate and start anew elsewhere, where he hoped to escape the shadow of the scandal. In the years that followed, as Michelle served her sentence, she became a silent observer to the world moving on without her. From behind bars, she heard of her children's attempts to rebuild their lives, the community's efforts to learn from the tragedy, and the slow healing process of those she had hurt. These stories were a bittersweet reminder of the life she might have had, a life forfeited by her own actions and the destructive choices she made. Her case remained a stark reminder of how deeply the seeds of deceit could sow chaos in the fabric of family and community. The suspicions surrounding Michelle Fletcher's belief that Michelle Williams was involved in Roger's death added an eerie layer to an already complex narrative. Michelle Fletcher struggled with the law enforcement's decision not to reopen the case. She felt that there were too many coincidences linking Michelle Williams to not only her husband's murder, but also, potentially, to Roger's untimely death. Determined to find justice for Roger, Michelle Fletcher began her own investigation. She started by gathering all the available information and documents related to Roger's death, interviewing friends and colleagues who might shed light on the days leading up to his death. She reached out to a private investigator, hoping that fresh eyes might uncover overlooked details or connections. Her efforts led her to a pattern of manipulative behavior by Michelle Williams that had not been fully explored during the initial investigation into Roger's death. She discovered emails and messages where Roger expressed concerns about Michelle Williams' behavior to Carl. In these communications, Roger hinted at his growing unease about the financial dealings and erratic behavior he observed in Michelle Williams, which he found troubling enough to document. However, despite these findings, the lack of concrete evidence linking Michelle Williams directly to Roger's death continued to stymie any official reopening of the case. The theory that Roger stumbled upon something he shouldn't have and was silenced remained speculative without forensic evidence or witnesses. Michelle Fletcher's campaign to tie both deaths together and her insistence that they were not coincidences garnered attention in the media. Some segments of the public began to rally around her cause, propelling the story back into the spotlight and prompting discussions about possible miscarriages of justice. Meanwhile, inside prison, Michelle Williams remained largely indifferent to the new allegations. Already facing decades behind bars, she focused on navigating prison life and maintaining some semblance of stability, distancing herself from the ongoing drama outside her confinement. As the years passed, the case of Roger Fletcher continued to haunt those involved. While no new legal actions could be taken without significant new evidence, the cloud of suspicion never fully cleared from around Michelle Williams. This lingering doubt served as a grim reminder of the potential depth of her deceit. 911. What's your emergency? There's a robbery in progress at the pawn shop, and my parents have been shot. Where is the robber right now? He's right here inside. Where are your parents at the moment? They're on the ground, they're dead. Please hurry, I'm really scared. Police swiftly responded, heading to the scene to assist 9-year-old Eric and his 14-month-old sister Mary. An unidentified assailant had brutally attacked the family of a priest, leaving no evidence. The criminal's actions posed one of the toughest challenges for the detectives handling the case. Luckily, they were able to locate witnesses whose accounts were pivotal in revealing the truth about the tragic event that befell the Johnson family in 2013 in Danville, Kentucky. Jack Johnson, a 35-year-old former priest who became a manager at a local pawn shop due to the previous owner's health issues, was known for his integrity and rapport with people. His transition from priesthood to managing the pawn shop had been smooth, and he was well-liked and helpful, traits that continued after he got married. Is there a robber at the pawn shop, and someone has been shot? Yes, the robber is here right now. Does the robber have a weapon? Yes, he shot my parents. Can he see where you are? No, I'm hiding in the back. Is the robber still at the front of the store? Yes, but I'm not sure if he's left. Please come quickly. The dispatcher, maintaining a calm voice, tried to gather more details while ensuring that help was on its way. Can you tell me anything else about the robber? What does he look like? Eric, trembling but trying to stay composed, replied, I didn't get a good look. I think he's wearing a mask. It happened so fast. Okay, Eric, you're doing great. Stay on the line with me. Police are on their way. Try to keep quiet and stay hidden. Can you do that for me? Yes, Eric whispered, his voice barely audible. In the meantime, police sirens could be heard approaching rapidly in the background as law enforcement raced against time. The officers knew that every second counted in not just apprehending the suspect, but ensuring the safety of the young children. Upon arriving at the scene, officers moved tactically, aware that the suspect might still be on the premises. One team swiftly cordoned off the area while another prepared to enter the pawn shop. Inside, the scene was chaotic. The once orderly pawn shop was now a site of devastation with items knocked off shelves and signs of struggle evident. In the midst of this, police found Jack and his wife, lifeless, a heartbreaking sight. As officers searched the area, a K-9 unit was brought in to track any scent that might lead to the perpetrator. The community, once a quiet, tight-knit group, watched in horror as the events unfolded, their sense of security shattered. Detectives began canvassing the area, talking to neighbors and reviewing surveillance footage from nearby businesses. They discovered that a suspicious vehicle had been parked near the pawn shop shortly before the incident. This clue offered a new lead in the investigation, rekindling hope that the assailant might soon be caught. Meanwhile, back at the police station, officers took detailed testimonies from the witnesses who were at the scene before the crime occurred. Their accounts varied slightly, but each piece added to the puzzle, constructing a clearer picture of the events that led to the tragic afternoon. As the investigation continued, the community rallied around Eric and Mary, setting up a fund to help them in their time of need and organizing vigils to honor the memory of their parents. The brutality of the crime prompted a deeper reflection within the community about safety and solidarity. Through diligent police work and community support, what started as one of the most challenging cases in the detectives' careers gradually began to weave a narrative that brought them closer to justice for the Johnson family. Leaving the store, the investigators focused on this footage, hoping to spot any suspicious activity or individuals who might have been shadowing Smith. They watched the tape repeatedly, looking for anyone who appeared to follow him out or showed undue interest in his movements. Back at the pawn shop, forensic teams were hard at work. They meticulously gathered evidence, photographing the scene and collecting the shell casings and bullets for ballistic analysis. The layout of the crime scene and the locations of the victims and evidence suggested a sudden and violent encounter, with little struggle from the victims, hinting that they might have been caught off guard. The local community was deeply shaken by the incident. The shock was palpable, and fear spread among the residents of Danville, who had known the victims as part of their daily lives. The brutality of the crime prompted an outpouring of support for Eric and Mary, who were now in the care of their grandparents. The description of the silver minivan and the bearded driver provided by the Rainbow Cleaners employee became a crucial lead. Police issued an alert for the vehicle and circulated the description to other agencies and checkpoints throughout the state. Roadblocks were set up in strategic locations, and patrols were increased in the hope of catching the suspect before he could flee the area. Meanwhile, detectives continued to delve into Dennis's recent business transactions. They interviewed colleagues and clients, learning about his dealings and interactions in the days leading up to his death. The visit to Lawson's jewelry store seemed particularly significant, considering the timing and the presence of the briefcase filled with substantial amounts of cash. As the investigation progressed, grief counseling sessions were organized for Eric, Mary, and other relatives affected by the tragedy. The community rallied to support them, setting up trust funds for the children and organizing memorial services for the victims. Despite the overwhelming loss, the resilience and solidarity of the community shone through, providing a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. Police also focused on enhancing security in the area, advising local businesses to install surveillance cameras and improve their safety protocols to prevent future tragedies. The lack of cameras at the pawn shop had been a significant handicap in the investigation, and authorities were determined to close this gap in security for other local establishments. As the days passed, the tireless efforts of the detectives and the crucial clues gathered from the public began to converge on a suspect. The surveillance footage from Lawson's jewelry store, along with the vehicle description, started to paint a clearer picture of the events that led to the heinous crime at the pawn shop. With each piece of the puzzle falling into place, the authorities moved closer to solving the case and bringing justice to the victims and their devastated families. Vehicle. With this critical piece of evidence, law enforcement intensified their efforts to trace the minivan's owner. They began cross-referencing DMV records for older model silver minivans with a square body type, combing through potential matches and reaching out to other jurisdictions to widen the net. Parallel to the vehicle search, detectives revisited interviews with local residents and businesses, hoping someone might have seen the minivan in the area before or after the crime. They distributed images of the vehicle extracted from the blurry footage to local news outlets, asking the public for any information related to the sighting of such a vehicle. As the community rallied to assist, tips began coming in. A local mechanic remembered servicing an older silver minivan a few days before the murders. He recalled that the owner was particularly concerned about ensuring the vehicle was in good working condition, citing a long journey ahead. The mechanic provided a work order with a name and partial address, which added another layer of verification to the ongoing investigation. Simultaneously, the police focused on enhancing the quality of the surveillance video to better discern the license plate and any unique identifiers on the vehicle. Technicians worked meticulously, using advanced software to enhance and stabilize the image. As the enhanced images became clearer, the investigation gained momentum. The license plate was partially visible, and with the help of the state's vehicle registration database, the police were able to identify several potential matches. Each owner was contacted, and their alibis and vehicle whereabouts on the day of the crime were thoroughly checked. Finally, one particular owner's details did not align with their stated activities on the day of the incident. This individual, a man with known financial troubles and previous minor run-ins with the law, became a prime suspect. Surveillance from his neighborhood confirmed that he had left early on the morning of the murders and returned late in the evening. Armed with this information, detectives obtained a search warrant for the man's residence. During the search, they found a wig matching the description of the fake blonde beard and clothing that matched witness descriptions from the day of the crime. Further evidence included a large amount of cash hidden in the basement and a .22 caliber pistol, which was sent for ballistic testing. With substantial evidence accumulating, the suspect was brought in for questioning. Under the weight of the evidence presented, he eventually confessed to the crimes, revealing a motive rooted in desperation and greed. He had heard about the large transactions often carried out at the pawn shop and had planned what he thought would be a straightforward theft, which tragically escalated into triple homicide. The community, while relieved at their arrest and grateful for the police's diligent efforts, remained shaken by the brutality of the crime. For Eric and Mary, though the arrest provided some closure, the journey ahead to heal from their profound loss was just beginning. They remained in the care of their grandparents, surrounded by a community committed to supporting them through their grief and rebuilding their lives after the immense tragedy they had endured. Continuing their search for the vehicle, investigators expanded their surveillance efforts further from the pawn shop. At 8:17 in the morning, a camera at the local Johnson Hospital captured the same vehicle, a silver Dodge minivan. This crucial discovery allowed investigators to identify the vehicle. In memory of Jack and Angela, their family organized a touching candlelight vigil where hundreds of compassionate individuals gathered, demonstrating the depth of love for the departed. Similarly, the Smith family, grieving the loss of Dan, chose not to let anger consume them. Despite their outrage, they joined in the funeral proceedings, showing resilience amidst sorrow. Meanwhile, the Danville Police Department sought public assistance in gathering information about the perpetrator or the vehicle. Soon after, on September 24th, a call came from Henry, a pastor in Warren, Michigan. He mentioned his last conversation with Dennis, noting a shift in Keith's demeanor when discussing the Danville murder. Keith expressed guilt as he had enabled Jack Johnson to acquire his former business. He suggested Justin might have been the primary target due to his weekly visits to pawn gold, carrying large sums of cash. These suspicions led investigators to scrutinize Keith's alibi. Surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy contradicted Keith's claims of being there at the time of the attack. Although Keith had a silver Dodge minivan, the evidence was circumstantial. To gather more information, investigators orchestrated fake phone calls with Henry's cooperation. In these calls, Pastor Keith eventually revealed his true sentiments toward the Johnson family, shedding light on his potential involvement. During these covert phone calls, Pastor Keith inadvertently divulged details that contradicted his earlier statements. He mentioned crucial timing and specific details about the day of the murders that he had not revealed before. This newfound information intensified the suspicions of the investigators, leading them to delve deeper into Keith's movements and motives. As the community mourned, the police continued to piece together the puzzle. The examination of surveillance footage from around the time of the murders showed inconsistencies in Keith's story. Despite his claims of being at the pharmacy at a certain time, video evidence and timestamp data suggested a different narrative, indicating he could have indeed been at the crime scene. The police decided to reenact the timeline of the crime to establish if it was feasible for someone to commit the murders and then appear at the pharmacy as Keith claimed. The results were unsettling. The reenactment showed that it was possible to travel from the crime scene to the pharmacy in under 5 minutes, suggesting that Keith could have committed the crime and still appeared in the pharmacy footage to fabricate his alibi. Armed with this information and the inconsistent statements made during the recorded calls, the police felt they had enough to bring Keith in for further questioning. During the interrogation, the pressure began to mount on Keith. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and contradictions in his alibi, Keith's composure began to crumble. He maintained his innocence, but struggled to provide a coherent explanation for the discrepancies in his timeline and his whereabouts. Meanwhile, the community's trust in Pastor Keith waned as details of the investigation leaked. The Johnson and Justin families, already devastated, felt betrayed by someone they had once considered a friend and spiritual leader. The public sympathy shifted noticeably towards the families as they grappled with the dual pain of loss and deception. With Keith's potential involvement more apparent, the police expanded their investigation to include financial records and communications that might reveal a motive tied to the ownership and transactions of the pawn shop. The scrutiny also extended to others in Keith's close circle who might have had knowledge of or involvement in the planning of the crime. As the case grew more complex, the legal proceedings prepared to take a significant step forward. The evidence, while circumstantial, painted a troubling picture of betrayal and calculated murder, setting the stage for a trial that would captivate and divide the community. As the case against Pastor Kenneth Roger unraveled, the community grappled with the shock of his heinous actions juxtaposed against his spiritual facade. The once respected pastor had meticulously planned and executed a triple homicide, cunningly attempting to cover his tracks and fabricate alibis to mislead law enforcement and the public. The evidence piled up rapidly once Keith began discussing details that only the perpetrator could know, suggesting he was at the crime scene despite his claims of being at the pharmacy. This discrepancy, coupled with the discovery of items like the fake beard and unexplained large sums of cash in his pawn shop, severely undermined his credibility. Moreover, the cash wrap with ribbons from the bank where Justin was a client pointed directly to a premeditated robbery and murder. Further complicating Keith's narrative was his admission that he wouldn't pass a polygraph test due to his military background, where he claimed to have been trained to deceive such tests. This claim, however, only fueled suspicions about his capability for deception and manipulation. The ballistics evidence tying the casings found in his shop to the murder weapon was the final nail in the coffin. It was a direct link to the killings of Eric and Mary's parents and conclusively placed Keith at the center of the crime, not merely as an accessory, but as the perpetrator. Keith's attempt to create a complex web of alibis, from being seen at the pharmacy to visiting the car wash, was ultimately his undoing. Each step intended to solidify his innocence only tightened the noose as investigators connected the dots, revealing his calculated movements before and after the murders. His eventual guilty plea before the trial was perhaps a reluctant admission of his unavoidable fate, given the overwhelming evidence against him. It spared the community and the victims' families the prolonged agony of a trial, but left many unanswered questions about his motives and the depths of his deceit. The revelation that Keith had fabricated his medical condition and had never suffered from a brain tumor, as he had claimed during his initial defense, added another layer of duplicity to his character. It painted a picture of a man who would go to great lengths to manipulate those around him. In the aftermath, the community and especially the congregants of Keith's church were left to reconcile the man they thought they knew with his grievous actions. The case provoked profound reflections on trust, betrayal, and the masks people wear. How someone who had been a spiritual leader, trusted to guide and care for his flock, could commit such cold-blooded crimes was a question that haunted many. The damage to the community's trust was deep and would take time to heal, as they mourned not only the loss of life, but also the betrayal of faith. The impact of Pastor Kenneth Rogers' crimes rippled through the community, leaving a scar that would take years to heal. In the small town where everyone thought they knew each other well, the realization that such darkness could exist behind a familiar and trusted face was chilling. The congregation Keith had once led underwent a crisis of faith, questioning not only their judgment but also the very tenets of their beliefs. In the aftermath of the trial and Keith's incarceration, the church faced significant challenges. Attendance dwindled as members struggled with their shaken faith and the stigma associated with the scandal. The church's leadership had to navigate this complex emotional and spiritual terrain, trying to rebuild trust and restore the community spirit. They organized counseling sessions and community healing events, inviting speakers to discuss forgiveness and recovery from trauma. Meanwhile, the families of the victims embark on their own painful journeys toward healing. Public memorials were erected in honor of Jack and Sarah and Justin, serving as a place for the community to come together and remember the lives tragically cut short. The families, though devastated, worked to channel their grief into advocacy, focusing on raising awareness about the warning signs of hidden malice in trusted individuals. Local law enforcement used the case as a learning opportunity, reviewing and strengthening their procedures for investigating complex crimes involving deceit at high levels. The case became a key study in police training academies, highlighting the importance of scrutinizing even seemingly airtight alibis and the necessity of looking beyond the surface in interpersonal relationships within small communities. Schools in the area introduced programs aimed at teaching students about ethics and the consequences of deceit, hoping to instill a stronger moral foundation and critical thinking skills. They emphasized the importance of transparency and honesty, using Keith's case as a cautionary tale about the paths that lead to corruption and betrayal. As the years passed, the sensational details of the murders in trial became a somber chapter in local history, discussed with gravity and reflection rather than sensationalism. Annual vigils were held not only to mourn the victims but also to strengthen community bonds and reaffirm commitments to vigilance and mutual support. The community slowly rebuilt itself, focusing on openness and rebuilding trust. The church eventually regained its role as a place of refuge and spiritual guidance, with a new pastor who was deeply aware of the past and committed to transparency and ethical leadership. In this environment of recovery and reflection, the community learned a hard lesson about the complexity of human nature and the importance of maintaining vigilance in safeguarding their societal and personal values. In the years following the shocking revelations of Pastor Kenneth Allen Keith's crimes, the community of Danville underwent a profound transformation. What began as a dark chapter in their history evolved into a catalyst for positive change and collective resilience. The scars left by Keith's deceit were deep, but they also served as reminders of the resilience of the human spirit. Families affected by the tragedy found solace in each other's company, forming support groups and networks to navigate their shared grief. Through acts of compassion and solidarity, they gradually found healing and strength. The community, once fractured by suspicion and mistrust, gradually reconnected through shared experiences of mourning and reflection. As they grappled with the complexities of forgiveness and redemption, they discovered a newfound sense of empathy and understanding for one another. Local initiatives aimed at promoting transparency and accountability flourished in the wake of Keith's crimes. Community leaders worked tirelessly to implement measures that would prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. They prioritized education and awareness, empowering individuals to recognize and confront the signs of deception and manipulation. The church, once tarnished by Keith's actions, emerged as a beacon of hope and renewal. Under new leadership, it embarked on a journey of introspection and renewal, recommitting itself to the values of integrity and compassion. Through outreach programs and community partnerships, it sought to rebuild trust and foster a sense of belonging among its members. Law enforcement agencies also underwent significant reforms, bolstering their investigative techniques and protocols to better address cases of deception and fraud. They recognized the importance of collaboration and information sharing in combating crime, working closely with community stakeholders to uphold the safety and security of all residents. As time passed, the memory of Keith's crimes faded, but the lessons learned endured. The community emerged stronger and more resilient, united by their shared experiences and a collective determination to uphold the principles of honesty, integrity, and justice. In the end, the legacy of Pastor Kenneth Allen Keith served as a powerful reminder of the capacity for both darkness and light within the human soul. Through their response to diversity, the people of Danville proved that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, hope and redemption are always within reach. Let's talk about the unfortunate events surrounding Daisy Coleman. Her story involves several young girls who fell victim to their own naivety and carelessness. They believed that their troubles would fade away, but life took an unexpected and tragic turn. These schoolgirls faced cruel bullying from classmates and even people they once considered friends. In a documentary called Audrey and Daisy, their stories unfolded. These incidents occurred in different places and at different times, yet they shared a common thread. Psychological violence can be even more challenging to endure than physical harm. Let's rewind to the beginning. The Coleman family. They lived in Albany, Missouri, and were a close-knit, happy bunch. Michael and Melinda, the parents, both worked in the medical field. Michael was a surgeon, while Melinda was a veterinarian. They raised 4 children together, sons Charlie, Tristan, and Logan, along with their only daughter, Daisy. The Colemans were respected members of their town, and life seemed idyllic until tragedy struck. Daisy Coleman's life took a tragic turn when she was just 12 years old. Her family, avid sports fans, was on their way to a soccer game in a neighboring town. Unfortunately, the weather turned bad, and their car skidded on the wet road, colliding with another car traveling in the opposite lane. Daisy's father lost his life in the accident, but thankfully, the children escaped serious injuries. The Coleman family, grieving their loss, decided to move to Marville, Missouri, seeking a fresh start. There, the children attended a local school, and their mother found work at a veterinary center. Slowly, they began to heal and make plans for the future. Daisy was an active girl, participating in dancing, gymnastics, and cheerleading at school. She also had a hidden talent. She was an excellent artist and dreamed of becoming a designer someday. At school, she had many friends who described her as bright, kind, open, and cheerful. Among them was her best friend, Paige. The two were practically inseparable, attending school together, sharing the cheerleading team, and spending nights at each other's houses. On one winter break night in 2012, Paige stayed over at Daisy's house. They watched movies, indulged in sweets, and chatted late into the night. Daisy, feeling adventurous, sneaked down to the home wine cabinet and swiped a bottle of hot liquor. She and Paige drank it after midnight. Little did they know that this seemingly innocent act would set off a chain of events that would forever alter their lives. Matthew Barnett, a popular guy at school and an up-and-coming soccer player, was friends with Daisy's older brother, Charlie. They often visited the Coleman family home. Daisy felt flattered by the attention from an older boy and eagerly chatted and flirted with him. When she mentioned spending the night with a friend, Matthew invited both girls to a party at his house, emphasizing that they could have fun without their parents. Daisy and Paige accepted the offer and quietly slipped out of the house through Daisy's bedroom window. Soon, Matthew and his buddy picked them up, and they headed to Matthew's house. Several other kids from their school were already waiting there. The party took place in the basement, accessed through the garage. As soon as Daisy and Paige entered, they were offered homemade alcoholic cocktails. Matthew, persistent and pouring drink after drink for Daisy, seemed intent on impressing her. Paige, concerned about her friend's level of intoxication, tried to intervene, but she was brushed aside. Meanwhile, Paige had her own romantic interest, Nicholas, whom she'd long had a crush on. They flirted and drank together, eventually seeking privacy in another room. Paige knew what would likely happen next. When they returned to the main room, Daisy was nowhere to be found. The door to the adjacent room, slightly ajar, revealed Daisy lying there, almost unconscious. Matthew had taken advantage of her vulnerable state, and to make matters worse, another partygoer named Jordan was filming the whole scene. On his cell phone, it later came to light that he took advantage of Daisy's unconsciousness and had sexual intercourse with her. The boys put both girls in the car and drove them back to Daisy's house. Paige had sobered up a bit by then, but her friend was still half-conscious and unable to stand on her own. Soon, Daisy started vomiting, and the guys literally dragged her out of the car while she was still vomiting. Matthew tried to help by gathering her hair, but he wasn't doing a good job, and Daisy's hair and clothes ended up soiled. The guys instructed Paige to go inside, assuring her they would stay with her friend until she sobered up a bit. Believing them, Paige went back into the room, through the window without waking anyone. She lay down on the bed and, being still drunk, fell asleep right away. In reality, the boys deceived Paige. As soon as she returned to the house, they left Daisy lying on the cold ground on a January night. They had first taken off her sunniette, later explaining that they were afraid someone would see them with a drunken Daisy and call the police. Allegedly, they removed the sunniette because Daisy was vomiting and had soiled it. Daisy lay outside in sub-zero temperatures for several hours before she regained her senses. Initially, she thought she was dead because she couldn't feel her limbs or move. She was also not wearing shoes or socks, and no one could explain where they had gone. Her wet hair was frozen to the lawn, and she had to make an effort to lift her head and look around. Eventually, Daisy crawled to her own doorstep and slammed her hand on the front door several times. Molina's mother woke abruptly, stirred by the noise. Assuming it was the dog requesting entry, she hurriedly opened the door. However, her senses nearly deserted her when she discovered her daughter lying on the porch, vulnerable and barely conscious. Daisy was undressed, without shoes, and her limbs bore signs of frostbite. The mother urgently called her sons, who promptly carried their sister inside the house. Daisy, clad only in a t-shirt and thin pants, trembled violently and emitted occasional sobs. The scent of alcohol clung to her. Initially, the mother tried to warm her with blankets, but realizing it was insufficient, she instructed her sons to place Daisy in the bathtub. There, Melinda carefully removed her daughter's clothes and noticed bruises and abrasions on her thighs. It became evident that Daisy had suffered abuse. The mother promptly contacted the police and medical professionals. At the hospital, Daisy's condition raised serious concerns. Tests revealed her blood alcohol level was twice the norm, and her body exhibited signs of frostbite and the aftermath of rough intercourse. Unfortunately, Daisy's memory of the previous night had been almost entirely wiped. The police then turned to questioning Paige, who disclosed the entire sequence of events. Both friends admitted to taking alcohol from the home bar without permission, hoping no one would notice. The harrowing events unfolded as follows. Molina's mother awoke to the noise, assuming it was the dog seeking entry. To her shock, she discovered her daughter, Daisy, lying helpless and semi-conscious on the porch. Daisy was undressed, without shoes, and her limbs bore signs of frostbite. The mother urgently called her sons, who carried Daisy inside. The chilling truth emerged. Daisy had been abused while unconscious. The police found her phone in the snow containing intimate correspondence with Matthew. The subsequent investigation led to questioning the three boys involved. Matthew, the host of the ill-fated party, confessed to inviting two girls, claiming they willingly participated. He denied buying Daisy a drink but later admitted to pouring alcohol to melt the ice in her heart. Matthew insisted the intimacy was consensual, emphasizing that Daisy was conscious. Jordan, another friend, filmed the encounter but later deleted the video. Nicholas acknowledged having sexual intercourse with Paige, who seemed agreeable. All three boys were taken into custody, with Nicholas being the sole one released. The tragic aftermath of these events underscores the importance of raising awareness about such neglected issues. The harrowing events surrounding Daisy Coleman's assault and its aftermath are deeply disturbing. The Netflix documentary Audrey and Daisy sheds light on the separate sexual assaults of two teenage girls, Audrey Pott and Daisy Coleman. The tragedies had devastating consequences. Audrey ended her life, while Daisy survived but faced immense challenges. Coleman was part of the cheerleading squad at school, but she got kicked off. Sadly, she became an outcast. Even though her brothers tried to support her, Daisy faced anonymous calls and texts that were mean and threatening. Her mom also received similar messages. Daisy's best friend, who was also bullied, had to switch schools. Daisy gradually sank into a deep sadness and avoided people. Things got worse when their house was set on fire. The Colemans decided it wasn't safe to stay in the city and moved to another state so Daisy could finish school. Years later, when Daisy was in college, her story gained attention online. People from all over the country, many of whom had experienced bullying too, stood up for her. A documentary called Audrey and Daisy was made, highlighting the issue of violence and harassment. The second character in the story, Audrey, faced a similar situation in California. She fell into depression and tragically took her own life. Audrey left a message online saying her life was destroyed and she saw no reason to keep going. The documentary project and the public support it received inspired the Coleman family to keep fighting for justice. They managed to reopen the investigation, and this time Matthew Barnett was found guilty. However, his punishment was shockingly light. Just 4 months of probation and a pitiful payment of less than $2,000 to the victim. After college, Daisy moved to Colorado for a fresh start. She found work as a tattoo artist, using her artistic talent. She also participated in another documentary project. Things seemed to be improving, but in the summer of 2018, tragedy struck her family again. Daisy's mom and younger brother Tristan visited her by car. Sadly, they got into an accident and Tristan lost his life on the spot. Melinda, Daisy's mom, suffered serious injuries. This heartbreaking event shattered Daisy's already fragile emotional state. She withdrew from socializing, finding solace only in her art. Daisy poured her pain and fears into drawings and sketches. Soon, she began feeling stalked by a stranger. Threatening messages are reread, and the stalker even showed up at her house repeatedly. It felt like a nightmare from her past had returned to torment her. Daisy sought help from the police, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. To make matters worse, she discovered that the second key to her house was missing. She suspected the stalker had stolen it. Then, on August 4th, 2020, the police were called to Daisy's house by Melinda. Daisy's life took a tragic turn. Her mother, Melinda, couldn't reach her and feared the worst. She urgently called the police, asking them to check on Daisy. When they arrived, Daisy was home, visibly scared. However, no intruders were found nearby, and the police left. Later, Daisy video called her boyfriend, sobbing and expressing her unbearable pain. She retrieved a gun from her desk drawer and took her own life. Emergency services were alerted, but it was too late. Daisy passed away at just 23 years old, becoming the third family member to leave prematurely. Melinda struggled with the loss, posting daily on social media, reminiscing about Daisy and apologizing. A few months later, she left a final post with an old photo of all her children together. She admitted she couldn't bear the pain and chose to end her life, echoing Daisy's tragic fate. The once large, happy family of 6 was now reduced to just brothers Charlie and Melvin. They wanted to keep some of Daisy's belongings as a memento, as they discovered that the salon where she worked had been robbed. The albums containing her exclusive sketches were stolen. As for Matthew Barnett, his life took a different path. After graduating from a prestigious college, he followed in his influential grandfather's footsteps. Upon learning about the deaths of his mother and Daisy Coleman, he expressed condolences online. What made a caring family man do something terrible? And how can you spot someone who might be a psychopath? Let's explore what psychopathy means. It's a type of mental disorder where a person lacks feelings like empathy and compassion, and they might seem shallow or self-centered. They can be really good at tricking people and hiding who they truly are, even fooling their own family. The Lissy family story is a scary example of this. Someone who seemed loving and close suddenly turned into someone who did something awful, even to their own kids. The man's actions and reasons for doing such a bad thing were shocking. People wondered if he was crazy, but tests showed he knew exactly what he was doing. This case shook Italy, especially the small town of Betti, where it happened. Now, let's try to understand what happened leading up to this sad event. It all started early on, Saturday, June 14th, 2014, in the quiet town of Betti. The day started like any other in Betti, with people going about their usual routines. But as the sun rose, the tranquility of the town was shattered by a series of events that would leave the community reeling for years to come. Neighbors woke up to the sound of sirens and commotion, unsure of what was happening. As details began to emerge, the horror of the situation became clear. A family known and respected in the tight-knit community had been torn apart by an unimaginable act of violence. The Lissy family, once the epitome of happiness and stability, now lay at the center of a tragedy that sent shockwaves through the entire country. What could drive a seemingly devoted husband and father to commit such a heinous crime? As investigators pieced together the events of that fateful day, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Behind the facade of a loving family man lurked a darker, more sinister side, one that few had ever suspected existed. But amidst the chaos and confusion, one question remained unanswered. Why? What could possibly motivate someone to betray everything they once held dear and commit such an unspeakable act? As the community struggled to come to terms with the enormity of what had transpired, one thing became abundantly clear. The Lissy family tragedy was not just a crime, but a wake-up call, a sobering reminder of the dangers that could lie hidden behind even the most idyllic facades. A man named Alex, who is 31 years old, was seen by his neighbors looking out of his windows, calling for help. He seemed scared and confused, talking unclearly and asking for someone to call the police. When people came to see what was happening, Alex told them that bad people had come into his house and hurt his family. He was not there because he was watching a soccer game with his friends. When he came back, he found his house a mess and his family not moving. His wife Basha was 38 years old, and they had a 5-year-old daughter and a son who was 1.5 years old. The neighbors called the police and the ambulance. While waiting, the person on the phone asked Alex to see if his family was still alive and to try to help them if they were. But Alex yelled that he would not go back inside or touch them. It was strange that he called his family bodies, even before he knew if they were really gone. When the police and doctors came and said his family had passed away, Alex did not show much feeling. He tried to cry but could not, and he seemed almost not to care. He had trouble remembering what happened and said different things, but he said he had a video on his phone that would show he did not do anything wrong. However, this video became important evidence against him. This was the start of a big court case that was solved quickly. The story that Alex said about robbers was not believed, and he became the main person the police thought did it. They found more proof at his house and started to think that maybe Alex had problems with his mind. Now, let's talk about Basha Ley, who was born as Basha Omas. She was born on September 17, 1975, in a small town in northern Italy called Pavia. She was the oldest child in her family and was always very strong, independent, and wanted to do well in Massachusetts. She was Lena and had many friends. She was highly good at her. She went to a famous university, resigned of Evan moved out of her. She moved to a big city, talked in her family a lot, and they not show gambling in her countryside. When she got up in a routine and still became a manager in civilly started working at a big battle, also loved theater and spent her free time acting in plays and musicals. She had a strong singing voice and was quite talented. People in Massachusetts liked her, and she was even recognized on the streets sometimes. However, she didn't have much luck in her personal life. She met many men, but none seemed right for a serious relationship. Then there's Alex Lissy, who was born in 1982 in Caserano, Italy. He was the oldest son in his family. His dad was very strict and favored Carlo's younger brother. Alex worked hard to please his parents. He did well in school and played volleyball, even though he preferred soccer. He never argued with his dad, who had strict rules for the house. Alex was nervous and shy as a teenager. He didn't have many friends and was bullied at school. Over time, he learned to blend in and be polite, even though he didn't feel close to anyone. Alex was good at avoiding tough questions and seemed to lack deep emotions. People who knew him said he didn't seem to care much about others' feelings. Carlo's life at home was tough. His dad was very strict and always favored his younger brother. Alex tried his best to do everything his parents wanted. He was great at school and played volleyball, but he really loved soccer. He never talked back to his dad, who had very strict rules at home. Alex was a quiet and shy teenager. He didn't have many friends and was often bullied at school. As he grew up, he learned to just go along with things and be nice to everyone, even though he didn't feel close to anyone. Alex was good at avoiding difficult questions and didn't show his feelings much. People who knew him said he didn't seem to care much about other people's feelings. Betty, on the other hand, was successful and loved by many. She was talented in her job and in the arts, but finding true love was a challenge. She met many men, but none were right for a long-term commitment. Despite this, she kept hoping to find someone special. Both Betty and Alex had their own struggles and dreams. They were different in many ways, but both were looking for something more in life. Betty searched for love, while Alex sought acceptance and a sense of belonging. Their journeys were not easy, but they continued to hope for a brighter future. After finishing school, Alex went to a well-known university to study economics, which his dad chose for him. Even though Alex didn't like economics or numbers, he didn't say anything and couldn't go against his dad's choice. So, Alex got used to doing things he didn't like just to make others happy. Alex was good-looking and used his looks to his advantage. He stayed fit with sports and going to the gym, which made him even more attractive. This made him very confident, maybe too much, and he started to love himself a lot. Alex liked to date a lot, but he didn't want anything serious. He didn't want to be responsible, make long-term plans, or get too attached, which often led to breakups. Even after college, Alex lived with his parents and didn't want to live on his own or start a family. He got a job at a big IT company in Milan, earned well, and had good chances to grow, but he wasn't happy with his work. His parents, though, were very proud, especially his dad. Alex didn't want to let them down, so he stayed away from any fights or criticism, but then his parents wanted him to get married and have kids. They knew about his short relationships and that he wasn't good at keeping them. This caused a lot of arguments at home. Alex would say he'd find a wife and have a family soon to avoid fights. Alex met Basha at a musical where she was singing. He was really impressed by her talent and charm. He was too shy to talk to her then, but later they met through friends. Alex was 23 and Basha was 30. They started dating even though there was an age gap. Basha, who was focused on her career, now wanted a family with Carlo. She saw some things in Carlo, like his hesitation and coldness, that she thought she could change. She took charge in their relationship and Alex went along with it. A few months later, Basha introduced Alex to her family, but her parents didn't think Alex was right for her. They thought he was not serious enough and too immature for a real relationship. Basha's parents' concerns grew as they watched Carlo's behavior. They saw him as someone who lived for the moment without any real plans for the future. Basha, on the other hand, was ready to settle down and wanted a partner who shared her vision. Despite their differences, Alex and Basha's connection seemed to deepen. Alex appreciated Basha's independence and strength, while Basha admired Carlo's free spirit. They complemented each other, with Basha bringing stability to Carlo's life and Alex adding a touch of adventure to Basha's. As time went on, Alex started to feel the pressure of Basha's expectations. She wanted a commitment, a sign that Alex was ready to be a part of something bigger than himself. But Alex was torn between his desire for freedom and his growing affection for Basha. One day, Basha sat Alex down for a serious talk. She expressed her love for him, but also her need for a real commitment. She asked Alex if he could see a future with her, one that included marriage and children. Alex realized that he had to make a choice. He could either embrace the life that Basha offered, a life full of love and family, or he could continue to live without strings, but also without Basha. After a long night of thinking, Alex made his decision. He chose to take the leap with Basha, to build a life together. They got engaged, and soon after, they were married in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Carlo's parents were thrilled, and even Basha's parents came around when they saw how happy their daughter was. Alex had finally found a balance between his own desires and the expectations of those he loved. He and Basha started their new life together, full of hope for the future. Basha chose to listen to her heart despite Carlo's actions. Meanwhile, Carlo's parents were happy with Basha because they saw her as a mature and capable woman who could handle their son, who was often unsure and irresponsible. The family leader was especially pleased, making Alex feel he had chosen well. About a year after they met, Alex and Basha moved in together and began planning their wedding. Alex was quiet and agreeable, always going along with Basha and avoiding any arguments. Basha was the decision-maker, and Alex supported her choices. This worked well for Basha, and she believed they would have a long, happy life together. However, just before their wedding, Alex showed a different side of himself, almost leading to their breakup. At his bachelor party, Carlo's friends encouraged him to have a last fling, and he ended up spending the night with another woman. The next morning, Alex told the woman he loved her and wanted to leave Basha for her. Later that day, he told Basha everything and said he didn't want to get married. Basha took the news well, packed up, and planned to move back with her parents while looking for her own place. When Carlo's father found out what had happened and that Alex had ended the engagement, he was angry. He told Alex he wouldn't see him until he apologized to Basha and convinced her to marry him. Alex did as his father said, bought flowers and went to Basha's house. Her parents didn't like Carlo, especially after his infidelity, and didn't want to see him. But Basha decided to forgive Alex and give him another chance. The wedding happened as planned, and they used the money from relatives to buy a house. Their life seemed perfect, with good jobs and enough money for luxuries. They had 2 children, Bea and Bradley, and to everyone else, they seemed like a happy family. Alex tried to keep his wife happy, not so much out of love, but to avoid conflict. Basha was satisfied with their life. As the years passed, Alex and Basha's marriage faced the usual ups and downs. They were both successful in their careers, which brought financial stability and allowed them to provide a comfortable life for their children. However, beneath the surface, there were issues that they had never fully addressed. Carlo's tendency to avoid conflict led to a lack of open communication between him and Basha. He would often agree to things without truly committing to them, which left Basha feeling uncertain about his true feelings. Despite this, she continued to hope that their love and family would bring them closer together. Basha, on her part, had always been the more dominant personality in the relationship. She made most of the decisions regarding their home and children, often without much input from Carlo. While this arrangement had worked for them initially, over time, it began to create a distance between them. Their children, Bea and Bradley, grew up in a loving home, but they could sense the tension between their parents. Bea, being the oldest sibling, often found herself mediating small disagreements and trying to keep the peace. One summer, the family went on a vacation to the Italian countryside, hoping to reconnect and strengthen their bond. It was during this trip that Alex and Basha finally had the heart-to-heart conversation they had been avoiding for years. They talked about their dreams, fears, and the future they wanted for themselves and their children. Alex admitted that he had been afraid to express his opinions and desires, worried about disappointing Basha and the children. Basha confessed that she had been feeling lonely in the marriage, missing the emotional connection they once had. This honest exchange was a turning point for them. They agreed to work on their communication and to make decisions together. They also decided to spend more quality time as a family and as a couple, to rediscover the love that had brought them together in the first place. Over the next few months, Alex and Basha made a conscious effort to change the dynamics of their relationship. They started having regular date nights, attended couples therapy, and made sure to involve each other in parenting decisions. Their efforts paid off, and slowly, the warmth and affection that had been missing started to return. They learned to appreciate each other's strengths and to support each other's weaknesses. Their children noticed the change too, and the family became closer than ever. Alex and Basha, this story is a reminder that even when love is challenged by time and circumstances, with effort and communication, it can be rekindled and grow stronger. They showed that it's never too late to change, and that a happy family life is built on mutual respect, understanding, and love. Alex lived two lives. At home, he was a perfect family man, spending time with his wife and kids. But in Milan, where he worked, he changed completely. He often met different women and went on dates. He liked being in charge of these short relationships, deciding when they would start and end. At home, his wife Basha was in charge, and Alex followed her rules. Rumors of Carlo's secret life reached Basha. Whenever she asked that, Alex said they were lies. In 2013, after their second child was born, Alex thought about leaving his family for another woman. He even told Basha, but she convinced him not to, saying it would upset his parents. Alex agreed. In 2014, a new woman named Maria started working with Carlo. He liked her a lot and tried to get her attention with gifts and compliments, but Maria didn't want to date a married man with kids. Alex didn't give up, even though she said no. Alex started to feel unhappy with his family. He thought they were stopping him from being happy. He imagined a perfect life with Maria if he wasn't married. He thought about this a lot and got very upset. He talked to Basha about divorce again, but she convinced him it was a bad idea. Alex looked for divorce lawyers online, but didn't like that he'd have to give half his money to Basha and pay for his kids. So, he started looking up how to end someone's life without getting caught. He read about a robbery where the robbers got away with it. Alex thought of a terrible plan to make it look like a robbery at his home. On June 13, 2014, Alex spent the day with his family. They went to an amusement park, shopping, and a cafe. Alex made sure they were seen by many people. That day, some people saw him and his family. Everyone noticed they were very happy when they got back home. The couple put their kids to bed upstairs and then went downstairs to the living room. They made love, which was part of Carlo's plan to avoid suspicion. He thought if people knew they were intimate, they wouldn't suspect him of harming his family later. Basha, Carlo's wife, thought he was getting ready to watch soccer with friends. She stayed in the living room watching TV. But Alex went to the kitchen, grabbed a big knife, and quietly approached Basha from behind. He stabbed her in the neck. Basha tried to escape, not realizing it was her husband at first. When she saw him with the knife, she was shocked. She tried to defend herself, but Alex was stronger. He kept attacking until she stopped moving. After killing Basha, Alex went upstairs and killed their 5-year-old daughter and 18-month-old son. Experts believe the kids probably didn't suffer and likely didn't wake up. Neighbors heard screams but didn't call the police because they thought the noise stopped quickly. If they had been more careful, maybe the children could have been saved. Afterward, Alex tried to make it look like a robbery. He cleaned up and washed off the blood. But he made mistakes, like putting back on underwear with blood on it. Then he went to a bar with friends like nothing happened. Later, he sent messages to Bashar's phone as if everything was normal. He came back home around 3 a.m. and acted shocked, pretending to discover the crime scene, but he accidentally recorded it on his phone, which ruined his plan. The police quickly realized it wasn't a robbery. The doors and windows were intact, showing the killer had access to the house without breaking in. After realizing Carlo's initial claim of a robbery didn't add up, investigators dug deeper. They found evidence that pointed directly at Carlo. His story fell apart under scrutiny. The footage from his own phone showed him staging the scene, contradicting his alibi. The investigation revealed the chilling truth. Alex had planned the murders meticulously. He had calculated every move, from the initial attack to the staged robbery. But his mistakes, like leaving behind blood-stained underwear and forgetting to turn off his phone's camera, sealed his fate. In court, Carlo's friends were baffled by the man they thought they knew. How could someone they considered a friend commit such a heinous crime? But the evidence spoke for itself, and Alex was convicted of triple homicide. The tragedy left the community reeling. How could a seemingly happy family be torn apart by such violence? It was a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. As for Carlo, he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars, haunted by the memories of the family he destroyed and the lies he told to cover his tracks. Some things didn't add up after the murders. Even though money and Bashar's jewelry were in plain sight, it seemed like the mess was staged. Items were just knocked over, not searched through, and there was no reason for robbers to harm the sleeping children upstairs. The case quickly changed from a robbery to deliberate murder. Carlo, Bashar's husband, became the prime suspect. His statements didn't match up, and he couldn't explain the fresh cut on his hand. Experts found tiny blood splatters on his clothes, not consistent with his story of trying to revive his family. The video Alex provided showed he didn't check on his wife or the children. Instead, he ran outside immediately, but he claimed he knew they were all dead and how they were killed. The discovery of a bloodied cloth in the trash was crucial evidence. It showed Alex tried to clean up after the murders. After his arrest, Alex stopped pretending to be upset. He showed no guilt or remorse even for his own family. Evidence from Carlo's laptop revealed he planned the murders. He confessed when he realized denying it was pointless. Shockingly, his motive was to avoid sharing assets with Bashar in a divorce and to start a new life with someone else. Alex was sentenced to life in prison. He showed no emotion during the trial, only remarking that he thought so. His father couldn't accept his son's actions and died of a heart attack shortly after Carlo's conviction. He couldn't believe he raised such a remorseless monster. After Carlo's sentencing, the community was left grappling with the horror of the crime. Many wondered how someone could be capable of such cold-blooded actions, especially towards their own family. Carlo's lack of remorse and his calculated planning left a chilling impression on those who followed the case. In the aftermath of the trial, questions lingered about Carlo's mental state. Was he truly aware of his actions, as the psychiatric examination suggested? Or was there something deeper at play? Some argued that his actions were indicative of a psychopathic nature, while others questioned whether he was truly sane. The tragic impact of Carlo's actions extended beyond his immediate family. The loss reverberated through the community, leaving neighbors, friends, and even strangers shaken. People struggled to comprehend how someone could prioritize their own desires over the lives of innocent children and a devoted spouse. Despite Carlo's attempts to move on with his life, the scars of his crimes remained. His name became synonymous with evil and betrayal, a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary individuals. As time passed, the wounds caused by Carlo's actions began to heal, but the memory of the tragedy endured. It served as a cautionary tale, reminding others to remain vigilant and to cherish the bonds of family and love. Meanwhile, Alex remained behind bars, serving out his sentence in a prison cell. His life, once filled with deceit and violence, had been reduced to a stark existence devoid of freedom or redemption. And as the years passed, he would be forced to confront the consequences of his actions and the lives he had destroyed,